Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for logging in. This is the first in a series that the Mississippi Public Health Association is doing around healthy and resilient workforces. And I'm so excited to welcome Sean Rossi. Sean serves on the board of the Public Health Association as our delegate up to the National Academy of the National American Public Health Association. But in her real job, she is at the Mississippi Hospital Association, where she is the Vice President of Communication and Member Engagement. She also teaches at the University of Mississippi Medical Center and as an assistant professor on a part-time basis. And she's an author of a great book around socially determined. I think it's a pretty cool book. We are recording all of these sessions and they'll be posted on our YouTube, and that link will be found on our website. So I will pass it over to you, Sean. Thank you.
All right. Well, enough about me because today is all about you, Inc. So I'm not going to ask for much, I guess, audience participation out loud because we're putting this on a YouTube channel later, and all of you may not want that information out there. So what I'm going to ask you to do, though, is there's going to be times where you need to get a piece of paper out or, do some self-reflection, because I do think when you're working on you, Inc., one of the things that you need is not just what you want to accomplish, but some guideposts of when you're going to accomplish it. So I hope that you leave today with some concrete steps that you can take. So one of the ways, we will get into defining both, your personal brand and your leadership brand shortly. But I've always loved this quote about, in general, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. And one of the things that this helps us see too is that we don't have any control over what other people say. I think we've all been in a situation where there was probably things said about us in a room that, we weren't privy to, that basically you do not have control over other people, but you have influence. So, and that is what we're going to focus on today, is the influence that you do have to make when people are talking about you in those other rooms, to make sure your name comes up in the right light. So when we talk today, we're going to talk about your promises and your values. And, that promises part could also be your strengths, but it's kind of like your personal brand is what people know about you. Maybe it's that, you're a fashionable dresser. Maybe you always wear interesting eyeglasses. I don't, your personal brand could have nothing to do with values at all. Part of it is just what people know about you to be true. Part of it is your values. And I'm differentiating that from your leadership brand by saying that, the leadership brand is going to marry that personal and your professional, like what they know about you, those promises and values, both ways. So if you want to put in the chat one word that you think encompasses your own brand now, or what you want to work on, you can put that in there. We want some audience participation. So your leadership brand is going to be the sum total of all experiences someone has with you based on the value you bring and the promises you make. If you remember our equation that we had earlier. So I want you to take a minute and get that sheet of paper out that I told you about. And so if your leadership brand is the sum total of experiences people have with you based on the value you bring and the promises you make, and just jot down, think about the last week, think about the last month, and what are some experiences that people had with you based on your values and the promises you make. Now, one of those may be, I tend to overbook myself. And so I spent last week backpedaling, trying to do everything because I want to do it all. And I don't necessarily have time to do it all. So I think Lydia has determined as hers. And now that she's taken on this new job as executive director of MPHA, she's probably going to need that determination. Lee says hardworking. David says compassionate. So thank you all for joining in there. So, an example would be that I think we all have experiences when we look back over the past week, some that we're especially proud of, and some that were like, and with our family or with coworkers, where we're like, should have had a bit more patience in that moment. I was stressed out. I was trying to do too much. And maybe that experience wasn't the best. Maybe something happened that was unexpected. But I think that in order to build that brand, and we're going to get into some of this, but you really have to know your strengths, but you also have to know your weaknesses. So, and you have to be honest with yourself. Sometimes we are not capable of being honest with ourselves. And it is actually easier to get for me to go to Lydia and say, Lydia, what do you think of, like, if I'm working on my personal and my leadership brand, and when you think of me, what is the first word that comes to mind? I'm not going to ask her. Don't worry, Lydia. She's starting to sweat. No. So I guess if you don't feel like you know enough about yourself to know what your brand is, then maybe you ask someone close to you. People do have these ideas, and they most of the time, if you explain that you're using it to grow and to get better at things, they're willing to help you do that. So I do think that your leadership brand is not just about your abilities, which I think a lot of people focus on that. Like, we looked at the list in there, and they were like, I'm determined, I'm hardworking, and those are all great abilities. But it's also about who you know and their perception of you. We talked about that whole Jeff Bezos, what people say when you're not in the room. And it is hard that sometimes their perception of you may not be what you see as how other people should see you. I mean, I think we've all been in a situation where someone's perception of us, you're like, well, how did they get that perception? There's somebody that somebody was like, well, I always thought you were an introvert. You don't say much in meetings. And they were like, introvert? I'm not an introvert. Just because I didn't speak in that meeting. So I guess we have to take ownership of that perception, though. We can't change people's perception, but we can shape it. So, because this is focused on public health, and that is not, you can fill in the blank with whatever if that's not you. I just want to take a moment for you to jot down on your piece of paper that we talked about, because we're having homework already, but you're going to take this later and keep working on it. So what drew you to public health in the first place, and how has that shaped who you are as a leader? And the reason that I want you to think about this question is because if you're like, I have no idea about my leadership brand, I don't know where to start. Well, this is a good place to start. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And how has it shaped who you are as a leader? I know that in my public health space, I began through a completely different chapter. The American College of Healthcare Executives started working with Keena White, who is in the public health space. And we started talking about all the crossover and all of the things that public health is working on and hospitals are working on. And it was just, in a state that has such limited resources, we're all just spinning our wheels and working in silos. And after that, I joined the Public Health Association, because I'm like, how can I help with this issue of all of these people in our state spending so much time and energy working on the same problem? And this is one of the ways that you can, is joining associations like this, the Public Health Association, the ACHE, different, whatever, fill in the blank, whatever association that you, that is for your certain area. So one thing that I want you to think about today when we're talking about this brand, and this is a very old article, as you can see, this is from 1997. So when you start saying, oh, it's all about the LinkedIn and the Facebook and doing it for the gram, when you think that's all we're talking about today, this was in 1997. And Tom Peters said, "We are all the CEOs of our own companies, me Inc." And I loved this issue because I don't know if y'all remember, but there was one other issue, not a Fast Company, but one of those that names like the most famous people each year. And they named, I think we were all people were Time Magazine People of the Year one year. So I feel like I can put that on my resume now that I was I was once named to the Time Magazine Person of the Year. I don't know if they check that. I don't know if it will fly, but I'm just saying, technically, I was named Time Magazine Person of the Year. And in Fast Company, my brand called You was featured on the cover. So there you go. You've got two things in your favor already. So it says here, his point was you can't move up if you don't stand out. And my father was always a salesperson or an entrepreneur of some sort. And, he was always, his whole thing was we're all self-employed. Like it doesn't matter what your position, your official job description is, we are all self-employed. So I think that's another way to look at it. He says here, regardless of age, regardless of position, regardless of the business we happen to be in, all of us need to understand the importance of branding. We are the CEOs of our own companies, Me Inc. To be in business today, our most important job is to be head marketer for the brand called You. It's that simple and that hard and that inescapable. And he didn't even know about all of the social media stuff that would come later and how, some of us will be like, oh, they have a brand called You, but it's all about all the good stuff and all of the strengths and none of the weaknesses. We only see all the good things. Bless you, Allison. We only see all of the good things happening. So I do think that part of the authenticity, which we'll talk about of the brand, is showing both sides. It's like you're not just strengths, your weaknesses too. You're a real human. So I do think that is just as important when we get into. Let me look at the. Lydia says, I just heard that tip at a conference I attended last week. It was such a great idea. It's also your daily habits, David says, that make you who you are. That's true. I know that Dr. Franklin on this call agrees with that because she was my professor when I was in the DHA program. And we read, David, you will be glad to know, well, she may be able to put it in the chat, that it was a book about habits. And she was very fond of it. You were muted, Allison. I just saw you sneeze. So I think now everyone is all in on making sure that you're okay. So, and blessed.
I'm so sorry. I was like, oh my gosh, did I just sneeze on Zoom?
You are blessed so many people, so many times that cold virus doesn't stand a chance. Lydia, you want to tell what you said you heard a tip at a conference. What was the?
Sure. It just about talking with others, especially your close collaborators or coworkers, about what are some of my weaknesses? What is your perception of me as a employee or whatever it is, fill in the blank. I just had never thought about growing as a leader by getting feedback in that sort of context.
I was in a meeting where they told you to text 3 people. You had to pick 3 people that you worked with and text them in during that meeting and ask them, if you could only use a few words to describe me, what would you describe? Of course, they probably thought that there was it's human nature to pick 3 people that are going to say nice things. I didn't text my mom, but I'm just saying that I'm sure I was not texting anyone that would say anything mean, but it was still eye-opening is what I'm saying. Even with people that I knew were going to say kind things, some of the things that they picked that stood out, I did not know that about myself. So I think I'm not going to encourage you just to text 3 people right now while we're on this webinar, but I do think it's good to have those conversations. Let's see if I can go back. So today, what we're going to cover in the branding exercise is an intentional strategic practice in which you define and you express your own value proposition as a leader. Um, and think too about some, and so you can put in the chat now, what are some brands that you admire? Like, not even thinking about why, but this is a brand that I will always gravitate to. I buy everything from this company. These are one of my favorites. Okay, I'm not seeing much in the chat. Well, we got one. Hold on. We got one I can talk about. LG for my laptop. Okay. Um, that's very specifically. I don't think I've ever. So I will say from that perspective, I was an Apple person for a long time. I still am a big iPhone, iPad, all of that. But I guess for a work, I broke something I got a Chromebook just by happenstance. Like, it was not a actual choice. It was more like something's broken. I need something to go on a trip. But that Chromebook, whenever I started using it and I was no longer worried anymore about my $1,200 laptop and setting it down somewhere, or if I dropped it on an airplane, it was $150 Chromebook. And it kind of gave me freedom to be like, take it to the cafe, take it to the here and there, and not worry about it. But I think we all have certain brands or things that we're connected to. And I think that we usually have either a service orientation to that, like, they always support the people I support. David says the Sean Rossi brand. Well, thank you, David. Also, and I'll send it to everyone who on the call and anyone that watches later. But David has a newsletter that he sends out every week. That is also leadership insights that I enjoy. And our paths crossed years ago on LinkedIn because we both liked those kinds of articles. And we have continued, we have never met in person, but we continue to cross paths on LinkedIn. So be sure to check out his. Or David put in the chat and how they can sign up if you have that information. All right. So the core values that we're talking about are the fundamental principles that guide your actions and form the foundation of your leadership style. So this is the workshop portion of the class. So if you remember, have any of you, and you can put in the chat if you have read Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. This is, I remember nothing from the book because I read a lot of books. I listen to books while I walk. I read books on the plane. So I read a lot of books, and honestly, they're usually like, if you ask me a year later what was in that book, I probably couldn't tell you. But this stayed with me from that book. And her point was, you can't lead with your values if you don't even understand your values yourself, or if you don't know your values. And she made you pick two. I think it was two. This particular I guess chart that I have here, someone picked three. So if you just have to have three, you can have it. But we're going to take a minute and pick your values, because that's going to be what we're going to focus on. Now, you can also pick something that's not here as long as it's in a similar vein. When I went through this exercise, I picked curiosity and wholeheartedness. And so one of the things, and of course, you're like, oh, well, if you pick these two, well, I also want to pick accountability, and I also want to pick adaptability, and hope and humility. Which of these things are bad? I mean, these are all good things most of the time. So you would want them all to be part of your brand. But just as Bombas, as we had somebody say that they love Bomba socks, Stephanie, and Sherry said she loves Tatcha skincare, which so if they tried to be all of these things, their brand would get muddied. And so with the curiosity and wholeheartedness. One of the things that I took from this exercise was when I was younger, much younger, like right out of college the first time, because I went back to school at 50. So um, when I was out of college the first time, I was kind of faced with a which job do I want situation. And these were both entry level jobs. This was not, neither one of them was going to be especially, um, you know, I guess that was $6 an hour for the one I chose. So that will give you some impression of I was not trying to become rich at this job. I was just trying to get employed. And one job was I was a master's degree in English, got out of college, went to my local paper, the Hattiesburg American, and thought I could be a reporter. And they were like, a reporter? You have a master's degree in English. You don't have a journalism degree, but you can design ads. And I was just like, what, did you not see my resume? Like, I've not designed ads either. And they're like, well, the whole pre-press department just quit, just walked out. And if you're willing to learn, you can design ads. And the other job was like at a bank, being like an administrative assistant type role, someone's assistant, that kind of thing. And I did not know it at the time, but I really kind of was like, well, this one sounds more fun. That's like, at least at least I get to design ads, so that curiosity and wholeheartedness of just learning something new, it, it shone through the values, but it was not, I think back to if I could have made a conscious decision, knowing my values, if I had gone through this exercise much younger, could that have guided me in career decisions where you get to a pathway and you try to decide, should I go back to school at 50? Should I take this job or that job? I do think that in addition to building your brand, this gives you a way to say, well, these are my values. And so when you're faced with two decisions, being able to look at a way to grade, a way to understand. So David, I think Pamela has on here that her values are learning, ambition, and caring. So I would guess, thinking of those, that healthcare would be a great field for her, for one, because we all know we're learning all the time. And that when she were trying to choose between two positions, she would probably need to look at the one that could be the best stepping stone to a higher position if ambition is couched in titles. And I think we all know that we reach a certain age where maybe a title is not necessarily our ambition as much as our desire to do good and see it in the world, but still, depending on what her ambition is. David says his are curiosity, gratitude, and humor, which I can vouch for. So I know that he's always making funny comments on my LinkedIn page. So I do think gratitude is a great one to have. And so just gratitude for what you have, even at the time that you might still be reaching for more with that ambition. Anyone else wants to share? Lydia says she picked hope and collaboration. I think that, I picked mine. This was pre-COVID. And I really do think that big events like that can change to how you see. I probably need to go back and read them all again, because similar to how a book changes when you get older and you read it again. Sometimes this list, it could change year to year. You might have a year that you're like, I really need some humor back in my life. So I don't assume that it's set it and forget it. So Allison has connection, commitment, and caring. Those should be easy to remember. She picked all the C's. Okay. Everyone's done with the exercise. So we're going to talk about your core values. We shared what values were important to us in the chat. We need to figure out ways now on our sheet of paper how we could communicate how those values shape who we are. So I gave you an example of myself and it gets me in trouble. I'm curious and I'm wholehearted, and it's hard for me to do things halfway. I jump in, and even if I shouldn't. So sometimes I have to, it's a strength. I think many of our values can be strengths and weaknesses. So we need to, caring, for example. When I was a teacher the first time around, freshman comp, when I was getting that master's degree in English, um, sometimes, they would share very personal stories in these essays. And it would take me, my boyfriend at the time would be like, you don't need to do this full time because you're getting so upset just from, you're getting very, like you read these freshman comp essays and when you get upset about it, he's like, this, how would you do this all the time? So I think that sometimes most all of them, caring, you would say, is a core value that serves you well. But then if you sometimes care about others to the detriment of yourself or don't take care of yourself, that can be affected too. Oops, I just did the wrong thing. Okay. And I want you to figure out how those core values shape your leadership vision for yourself. So, Lydia, I'm going to pick on you. But I think that hope and collaboration would give you a leadership vision that you see in the future. Like I see that in you every day. So you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, it could be a positive or a negative around collaboration. I think I enjoy getting other people's input when I'm working on a project. But that can delay things a lot. Sometimes if a decision needs to be made quickly, um, uh,
Yeah.
taking that strategy sometimes makes it take much longer than it really should.
Yes. And on my curiosity, I'll start going down a rabbit hole in something, and I've created something no one asked for, like 2 hours later, like I've spent 2 hours researching this. I'm ready to give a presentation on it, and no one really told me, asked for that. So I think that curiosity, at some point, you got to stop and just, do the thing. So I want you to not only look at how your core values shape your leadership vision for good, but also how they could affect that vision in blind sides. So just give yourself a second, or you can put it in the chat if you're willing to share um, how you see those core values played out in your leadership vision for yourself. Hi, Allison. Okay. So when you think of times, one of the things that I wanted to talk about with the core values, what we just covered, is when you think of times that you felt the proudest of your work, what values were you demonstrating? And I'll use Lydia as an example because I think that when and I'm speaking for her, you can disagree, but I'm guessing that when you have felt proudest of your work with MPHA, it is when hope and collaboration have been at the forefront.
Yeah. I've been fortunate that I got to serve on the board for a decade or so before I took this role as executive director. And yeah, I think just thinking back on some of the achievements MPHA has made, that's hope and collaboration are words I would use to describe those
Well,
for
in
sure.
this
Good
webinar
point.
series, this webinar series, when you described it to me, it was Lydia's vision. And I think that she saw it as a way to give hope to those who needed it, along with inviting collaborators.
Very true.
Yes.
Very
All
true.
right. So for those of you that aren't Lydia, that I can't pick on, write down to yourself when you think of the times that you felt proudest of your work. Now, this is not your personal life, this is your work. What values were you demonstrating, and are they the same as the ones that you listed as your core values? You can come off mute and talk about it, or you can put it in the chat if you want to interact.
Would you mind going back to the values list too? So
Go.
awesome.
And you can find these on her Dare to Lead website. If you
Mm-hmm.
just, I'm sure if you type in Brene Brown Dare to Lead values, this sheet comes up. She's got like a worksheet online that you can share with others too. if you want to do this in a small group at your work or with your team, it's just a good exercise to go through in general. I think it's similar to some of those personality tests too, that when you know someone's values, you know a little bit more about them. So if you, it's similar to how I think at one time we were all doing those part, are you a D, are you a are you a I, or whatever, all of those. And there's been different ones, that ENTJ and all the different tests that have come and gone. I think that part of it too, though, is if you know someone's values, then you can pretty much figure out some of the other things about them that are going to make them mad. For example, if hope is a value of yours, Lydia, then I'm guessing if you are around someone that's very negative and very, just that everything is gloom and doom, that it's hard for you.
Yeah, and trying to recognize that and understand that not everybody has to be happy all the
Yeah,
time or look for hope.
yeah.
I
Well,
recognize
and
that
I mean,
it can be a downfall on my part too. So
yeah, I mean, optimism is one here too. And as we all know, sometimes optimism can be misguided. I mean, we've all had moments when we shouldn't have been optimistic, and we were.
hmm
So,
hmm
okay. So your leadership principles are the things you believe to be most important about leading others. And unfortunately, most people figure out their leadership principles backwards. And that is that they've had a boss or someone that was a leader that was the worst example of this, fill in the blank, that I've ever seen. And I just know, I don't know what I want my principles to be, but I know I don't want to be like that. So, what I want you to do is to take a minute and try to be proactive about it. And instead of just thinking about the things that you hated, what, for your leaders that you have had that were just very, the best, the ones that you're like, if I could have worked for them forever, I would. What principles did they have? And did you bring that to your beliefs about leading others? David says he is very proud of teamwork, for as it is said, the customer experience will never exceed the employee experience. Yeah. Yeah. In healthcare, it is directly linked, employee experience and patient experience, often through scores. I think there's much research that shows a direct connection. And I'm sure that's the same in all fields, but especially in healthcare. Okay. If you know what matters to you, it's easier to commit to change. So I think that we're talking about our leadership principles, and some of us know that we need to grow in certain areas in those principles. We know the areas that need more work. But if we know what matters to us, then it's easier to commit to that change. So this is asking for public health leaders, but you can put any leaders who are leaders inside or outside of public health, whose brands you admire and why. I know that Brene Brown is one of, a lot of people. She's got a leadership brand for sure. She's become, and in fact, she had an article recently about how actually her brand works against her sometimes because people want to tell her things, complete strangers. She is this very brand of caring and, basically she's built a strong brand, and sometimes people want to talk to that brand about their problem when she's just a person trying to get on a plane. She does not necessarily want to talk to you about the Brene Brown brand at that moment. And so you can see how, that can work against you too. But anyone, you can put it in the chat, you can say it out loud, come off mute, you can just think it inside your head. Think of leaders whose brands you admire and that you think of them as having a strong brand.
I feel like kind of because we have had several presidents since I'm in the MPHA mind space. We've just had so many past presidents when I've been in the leadership roles that they're good listeners. They I feel like so many of them think forward through several years ahead of time, not just what needs to be happening right now. So forward thinking and broad thinking as well.
Right. So when we're defining our leadership brand, we are working on our reputation, which is the now, and our aspirations, which is what we want to be remembered for. So as Lydia says, that she was talking about some of her past leaders that she has very positive thoughts of, and that they were forward thinking and strategic. So is that your reputation now, or is that something that you aspire to be? So I think that that's part of that conversation that you have with yourself, and others to ask. But maybe you're already considered forward thinking, and that's not an aspiration, but your aspiration is, I want to leave a legacy of in my state or in my field, or whatever that aspiration is. And when I say that, the authenticity part, when I say that, and I think we've all heard the arguments on Facebook or other places, like, oh, that person only, it's, fake book. Like, I don't know, no one's really having that much fun. No one's going to all of those places. So I think that part of that is we tend to just show on, and this branding is not just social media, but on social media channels, sometimes we just tend to show the happy, all bright, shiny times. And one time I tried to make, I don't know how many of you have been to Jazz Fest, but I tried to make the crawfish bread that they sell at Jazz Fest. And it looked off. I mean, it exploded in my oven. It came apart. It was the most awful. It looked bad. And I posted it on Facebook, and someone asked me later, like, why did you post that? Like, you always post such recipes that, like, here, you posted this and I made it and it was so good. Like, why would you post that? And I'm like, well, if they have to, if they have to live with all of those Facebook posts of me, like, here's my perfect soup with my, I think they should get to see the crawfish bread that exploded in my oven. Like, that's the authenticity part of it. And you know what? I tried something new, and it didn't work out, and that was fine. And sometimes it's not a recipe, it's our career that happens. It's not crawfish bread. Sometimes it's, I tried something new, didn't work out. David says on here are some of the ones he picked. I'm sure I say her name wrong. Ana DePello Garcia, founder of Lean In Latinas, a Sheryl Sandberg Lean In circle that helps fellow Latinas discover their why, find their voice, and climb the ladder of identity. So good. Anyone else wants to share, just put it in the chat. So what I'm trying to tell you in this slide is just be yourself. Like, don't make your brand, like, people see through it, I guess. So if you want it to be an authentic brand, don't just make it about the shiny good things. And one thing that helps you, I think, when you are trying to leave this and later actually define your leadership vision, is just, how do you want to be remembered as a leader? I took in college, I had a minor in psychology, told you I had a master's degree in English the first time. And I took a death and dying class. And it was really just for an elective. It was the right time, I mean, but they made us plan our funeral. And I was 20 years old. And they made you, like, plan the whole thing. Like, what do you want it to be? A party? Do you want it to be a sad and somber? Do you want people to make speeches? What food do you want? You had to plan your funeral. And I think that even though it was a very strange exercise to go through, I think sometimes as leaders, we need to think about our retirement. And, at 55 now, mine seems much closer than it did at 20, but still, you want to think of how you want to be remembered. And I think that, David gives the example of someone who really has gone out of her way to create voice and for those Latina leaders. Is that was what I don't know that's what she wanted to be remembered for as a leader, but that's what he will remember her for. And so I think that it does help when we all get we figure out, what do we want to be remembered for? Do we want to be remembered as a visionary or as someone who got things done? Or do we want to be remembered as someone who cared when no one else did? What do you want to be remembered for? How do you want to be remembered? So to help you in this exercise, I have a few questions here for you, and this is the homework part. What work are you doing now, even for 5 minutes a week, that you love and you want to do all the time? I think that a lot of us, have jobs, real jobs that pay the real bills, but there's still portions of our jobs that are that love, 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 love. This is what excites me. And there's portions of our job that, it's part of the job and you have to do it. And I think that we need to lean in more to those, look and see what it is at the time that you were excited and you love. And who's doing that work that seems exciting to you now? Who else is doing that work? Who can you network with? You might, if you are envious of person's career or their job, what similar work might you want to be doing in the world? Like how could that translate? Like take that jealousy and be like, why this is why I'm jealous, because he or she gets to do this all day and get paid for it. Well, this is part of that vision of charting your path, that lets you see that the self-reflection could lead to me doing something different. Maybe I only do 5 minutes of this work right now, but I could do 5 days a week of it if I found the right position. If anyone wants to share in the chat or come offline and talk, feel free. I will read your responses. So we're going to talk a little bit about your strengths. We talked about your values earlier. And so I hope you have a sheet of paper. You have your values. Now I want you to talk about your natural strengths. And for example, my natural strength is basically I can talk to anyone about anything. And in fact, it can be a weakness too, because I often find myself talking to anyone about anything. So as we mentioned earlier, some of your strengths and your weaknesses might be the same. As curiosity was a strength of mine, it can also be a weakness. But even if you don't do this now, make sure you take some time later to outline your strengths. And here's just some traditional leadership strengths that, you might be an expert on something. You have deep expertise. You might have in your organization, people might think, well, you might have been there for 25 years and they are like, this place couldn't survive if so-and-so wasn't here. So what are some of those traditional leadership strengths, but also the soft skills like emotional support, giving feedback, brainstorming, that sort of things. But also I want you to think a little bit about your weaknesses. And part of that is being honest with yourself about what your weaknesses are. And part of that, one of my personal weaknesses is I'm impatient. So it's like if things don't happen really quickly, I have very little patience for things that take, and now there's a lot in the business world that doesn't happen. You don't just check it off your to-do list that day. It takes a long, that's why we have project managers, because there are some things that are just, now you can break them into smaller tasks that you can then perform, but I know that is a weakness of mine. Let's see. No one else, no one's sharing their weaknesses. We were sharing all of our strengths, but no weaknesses being shared. So just as you were going to go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking, I don't have a lot of self-confidence, and it's taken decades to feel comfortable talking in public, and I doubt my decisions often. So just trying to learn to live in that.
Well, Lydia,
and grow from that.
I had the opposite problem of you. Some people perceive me as having more self-confidence than I should have. So I'm just saying that I think sometimes too, though, self-confidence can be perceived as aloof, or, there are other things that it can be perceived as. So I do think that we do need to know, we need to assess ourselves and figure out what those weaknesses are. I also wanted to say, and this is something that people don't think about too much. We understand our brand, maybe, we've gone through this exercise and we get our brand. But I want you to think about your brand and you under stress and what changes. And this is what I had to spend a lot of time on, because when I get stressed, I tend to make people feel like, just come on, get it, spit it out. I don't have time to ask about your Friday. Give me what I need and let's go. And to me, I'm getting things done. But when you're working in a group of people and you're working as a team, as we all know, you can get things done and still not get the right things done. So I want you to think about when things get stressful, your body language, your tone of voice, and how you speak to others when you are stressed, not necessarily in times of stress like COVID, but that too, but more. And like when you feel, when I feel stressed, I start holding my breath, almost like involuntarily stop breathing. David says public speaking is always challenging as you don't want to disappoint your audience. I wish I was a better storyteller. Oh, I think that storytelling is a superpower. And I think in this day and age, we need stories more than ever, but I think it's good because that's an easy skill to work on. So I think we're all natural storytellers. We just need to remember how to do it. I think we're all good story listeners, and that starts there. So, and I will give you an example during COVID. Here in my team, we had, we went home and we thought we were going to go home for maybe 2 days. They sent us home with laptops, and we didn't think that we were going to be at home very long. And we were, of course, we never came back for years. But then part of it, we had, even in Jackson, Mississippi, and the metro area, people that lived way out really didn't have strong internet. And a lot of my team had issues with connecting on internet. And I jumped in and just started doing things because, we needed to get all of this done, and they were having problems with internet. And so what I'm telling you is, as a person, as an individual contributor, that was the right thing to do. Jump in, start doing things, get things done. As a leader that was building a brand, those people were like, oh, well, I guess I'm not really needed. Like what she's going to do it all. Like, so I just want you, sometimes I want you to think about how you are perceived yourself under stress, but also how you come across to others. Because sometimes, we talked about that perception thing, that it does not really matter, that it's just their perception. If they think that, you need to be aware of it. And you also need to be aware of the perception that others could have. So make sure that you also think about your times of stress and how you react and how others tend to react to you. I've noticed, my son's 25 now, but when he was a teenager, if I raised my voice at all when talking to him, and I'd get that mom, that tenor of the momness, then he would immediately have a different reaction than if I kept my voice like this. And I think some people have that reaction too, to like high stress. I have found myself with people that have to be stressed in their job, like they don't feel like they get their job right unless they're reach that level of stress, and it's contagious for me. Like I start I'm not naturally stressed, but it's contagious. I catch it all easily from others. So, and that's part of the, how do you want others to feel after interacting with you as a leader? And I think that thinking about that will help you get over that. Well, what does it have to do with their perception of me? How does that matter? Like, why? I don't know why they think I'm stuck up. I didn't say anything to them that would make them think I was stuck up. But when you act, when you focus on how you want others to feel after interacting with you, and if you want them to go away happy and smiling and, oh, that was a great encounter, well, then you start doing some of that internal searching a little easier. Lydia says, I feel like I'm a good listener most of the time, but when I get in times of stress, my listening abilities tend to decline and I tend to miss things. And perception really can be reality. And that is probably the hardest part in this whole process, is admitting that if people have that perception, then you need to work on it. Because I think sometimes we do think it's just their perception. What can I do about it? But we need to start being a little curious about why that perception exists. In some ways that you can make sure that you grow your leadership brand is networking and mentorship. Also, not just being a mentor, but opening yourself up to learning things from new people. And that networking part helps with all of that. How can you use your professional network to amplify your brand authentically? So we're going to talk about LinkedIn and all of that, but understand that until you have your brand set, you're not going to grow it on any channel until you know what it is. And sometimes it happens by accident. I think years ago, I don't even really remember when, I start every day to this day reading the comics. It used to be a real funny pages, it used to be an actual comic newspaper that you read. And now I go to gocomics.com. But to me, that is the way I like to start my morning. And I usually share a comic that I found on different channels. And it was really, for me, it was just like, oh, that was my favorite one of the morning. It's like telling someone your favorite song or something like that. I mean, it was that kind of relationship. But then I started doing it, and people that I didn't know would be like, I'm coming to your page every morning to see what the cartoon is. So, and that it became part of my brand, and it was not I guess, wasn't something I planned. It was just me sharing part of my day with other people. So I think that that's how it can be amplified, but also that it needs to be authentic, happen authentically. When we talk about LinkedIn, we're going to say that your LinkedIn profile is not the same as your resume and should not lead like one. You're trying to be networking online. What do you want to highlight about yourself? And people like me who could post 23 times a day, I have to tell myself sometimes, like, no, they don't need to know that. Like, everyone doesn't need, to know this part about you. And Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of these different channels, sometimes people share different things on different channels. Like, I wouldn't go to LinkedIn and post my crawfish bread picture, but people on Facebook, I would share that with. So it's also knowing what channels, and for each of those channels, it might be different for Facebook than it is for LinkedIn, but I think it helps just to write down 3 to 5 of those brand characteristics that you want to be known for. And if it's, deep knowledge, then you need to make sure you're sharing information about the areas that you want to be known as an expert in. See your LinkedIn profile as your leadership story. It's not, it's a first person narrative using short, concise paragraphs, bullet points. Make sure that you do have a professional profile photo. Make sure your headline is changed. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I did put some links, and Lydia can share these slides and the recording with those who signed up for it. But these are some, I guess, further tips from these links down here that you can explore. And who do you want to influence? I mean, I think that's part of, if you're looking for a job, most of you are trying to influence recruiting managers. If that's not who you want to influence, I think just like any brand, you need to know your audience. So who is it that you're trying to influence for this thing? And this is going to give you an example of a personal brand statement versus just a title. So say that you have someone on LinkedIn and their title at the top just says Senior Project Director at the Mississippi State Department of Health. And we've all seen that many times, whatever's. But then if you saw someone whose title at that top of their LinkedIn page says, I get to come up with ways to battle the most pressing environmental challenges the world is facing using my passion to drive change. That hits a little differently than senior project director at the Mississippi State Department of Health. And so I think that's what we want to focus on, is that kind of brand statement. So all of these presentations like this, as we all know, we could have just wasted an hour of our life just listening to me talk. If you don't do something, you don't do something when you leave here, if you don't write down 2 to 3 actions right now that you can start implementing immediately after we get off this call, that you can enhance your leadership brand. And I have some examples here. We talked about asking colleagues for feedback. We talked about updating my LinkedIn profile. Tasha, Tasha was coming off mute, I thought. Sharing industry relevant content. I need to network more. I need to go to in-person events. I'm tired of being online. I want to get out in the world and show appreciation and recognize the work of others. I think a lot of times on some of these channels, we spend a lot of times focused on ourselves, but we are part of networks and we have other people that we want to celebrate every day. So David, it's great to see your face, and even if it's not in the real world, it's virtual. So does anyone have other actions that they think that they could do as soon as they leave here? Any other actions to share?
I was just thinking, one thing I want to work better on is kind of getting out of traditional circles.
Right.
It kind of can help build your knowledge base by talking with non-traditional partners.
Yeah.
That's how your chat, David. That's fine.
Well, it is nice to see your face, not just a LinkedIn profile picture. So, well, any questions for me? That's all that we're at the hour, and I tried to get you a lunch and learn, and I got 2 minutes left. So, anyone have any questions or advice or anything they want to share? Well, thank you for the opportunity today, Lydia. Appreciate it.
Yes, this was great. I will email you all a certificate of completion. I know some professions are able to keep that with their portfolio to track your professional development. We haven't reached out to get professional development approval for any of these, but thank you so much for this presentation, Sean. I got pages of notes from it.
Thanks. See y'all later.
And this will be posted on the MPHA website as well. So I'll send all that information. Thank y'all.
Bye.